Hey, before we dive in, I've created a wayfinding guide called Your Story, Your Map for when you're feeling adrift and need to orient before moving forward. It's simple. Of course, it's not easy. It's contemplative and it works. You'll find an audio version, short guide, reflection worksheet. Link is in the show notes or visit letrante.com. Hi, hello, and welcome to the Mettā Interview, generous conversations with brilliant humans, contributors to Letrante. I'm Anne V Mühlethaler, and today I'm joined by someone I've known for over 20 years, Giulia Galli. Giulia and I first met in the early 2000s when she was working at Alberta Ferretti on Sloane Street in London as a PR assistant. We both made our way up or through the fashion world and communications, and our path crossed again years later thanks to a mutual friend. Now, after we reconnected, every other time I was visiting London, something I was doing often, I'd reach out so we could grab coffee or a breakfast together. Now, we weren't close friends. We never tried to work together or create partnerships. So there was nothing transactional about our fostering this connection. And yet I kept making time, which, if you know how few hours there are in a day, is not something I do lightly. And I think we both felt it, this quiet pull to stay in each other's orbit, even if neither of us could have explained why. Now, what I've always appreciated about Giulia is that our conversations never stayed at the surface. Even before either of us became coaches, there was a depth and a directness to the way she engaged with the world that I found enticing. Now, I'm mentioning this because I can't say I've always listened to my intuition, but in this case, I feel like I did. And I couldn't have foreseen when we met over 20 years ago, or when we started meeting every now and then around 8-9 years ago, that Giulia would be appearing on my podcast. And a second podcast even. How wild is that? That we would be sitting here talking about the importance of teaching kids to think, about intentionality, about giving parents more choice in how they act and parent every day. I guess I'm sharing this with you to say, if you find yourself in a similar situation, following a pull, following your intuition about someone who you're not sure why you keep on connecting to, well, I'm thinking it's worth it. So today, Giulia is a London-based parental and mental fitness coach, the author of When a Parent is Born, and the founder of Reegal Coaching. After her many years in international fashion and communications, she now works with parents to help them step off autopilot and into conscious choice, parenting with intention rather than from reaction or tradition. Her methods draw from neuro-linguistic programming, language awareness, and her own experience raising two children with a clarity and openness that, as you'll hear, is quite remarkable. In our conversation, we explore Giulia's question, what is my intention? We talk about curiosity, about the power of deep listening, about the words we say to our children that they carry with them long after we've forgotten we said them. And we end up somewhere neither of us quite expected, reflecting on what becomes possible when we make space for silence, for thinking, and for the kind of knowing that only emerges when we stop rushing to fill the gaps. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So without further ado, I give you my Mettā interview with Giulia Galli. Happy listening. Giulia, thank you so much for being here. It's so lovely to have you on the Mettā interview.
Thank you for having me.
So you and I met a long time ago, long time ago. And actually, surprisingly, I think I remember my first time meeting you. Really? If I'm correct, you had just arrived in London. You were a PR assistant at Alberta Ferretti on Sloane Street.
Yes.
And I was doing a bunch of different jobs at Christian Louboutin, right behind Sloane Street. And I remember you invited me, crucial moment, in at a sample sale at the basement of the store, I want to say.
It was the basement.
Yes, it was a highlight of my year because I think I had just arrived and I was like, oh my God, stars in my eyes. I still have a piece that I got that day with the most incredible embroidery.
Really?
I know. And it's just so incredible that I just can't part with it.
Oh, well,
memories.
Those was beautiful times and beautiful pieces. So I'm glad you still had them. I still have a few too. So good times. But it must have been 20 years ago, I think, because I arrived in London, in 2003.
Yeah. So must have been exactly that.
Wow. Long time ago.
So I love to start the Mettā interview by asking my guests, what's something that's exciting you or that you're curious about at the moment?
I am curious about so many things right now. You know, the state of the world, first and foremost. I am an avid podcast consumer of news and of opinion pieces. And what fascinates me right now is, and I was talking to my friend today, how is it possible that there is such a big generational gap between me and my parents, or us and older people, in terms of being enraged or not being enraged about what's going on in the world? You know, I assume that everyone with a little bit of humanity is just all on the same side, but it's not like that. So it fascinates me to understand how people react differently to what for me is like, I'm sorry, that's just crazy. It's a lot about the news. My feed on Instagram is basically all about the news and what happens. It's not even fun anymore. I don't find anything inspiring anymore. So yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah, I hear you. Being preoccupied with what's going on in the world is an active part of my existence as well, for sure.
Yeah. And I have as many conversations as I have with the people around me. I had a friend from the States over the weekend, and I was asking her, because she lives in New York, how is there firsthand? So I talk to as many people as I can. The majority are sharing my same view. So it is good, but it just adds to my frustration. But yeah, it is tough times. And then because I work with parents and I am very conscious of how we speak about things with children, I am very interested to explain to my children these things and what's happening and how to view it. And very amusingly this morning, my daughter, she's 15, and she said, I'm going to be voting at the next UK elections, which is scary for me because that shows how old she is and how old I am. But she said, please, when the time comes, can you please don't tell me who you're voting for, because I want to make up my own mind.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, that's great. You know, she's already very thinking ahead, which, okay. But I like that. I like that she wants to make up her mind about it.
That's beautiful. That's so great. It's funny because as you were, I did not know where you were going to go with that story, but I had this echo, but generationally different, that I remember. Sometimes I misunderstand what happens in the world and how people vote because of their affiliations and being wives and mothers and daughters. And because in my household, my parents did not vote in the same direction. My father was, an ex-communist, a very strong leftist. Yeah, my mother was center, and I love the idea that it was absolutely understood that everyone could have their own opinion under the same roof. And I think if maybe there's one thing that I find sad in the state of what I perceive to be the world right now, the way we communicate is how less of that respect that everyone can come from a different opinion.
You're absolutely right. And I actually saw something today about this, about people saying that, one thing that I hope, it's crazy, but I never know, is that they would like women not to have the vote, because if they vote differently from their husband, it's dividing the family. And I had to listen to it twice because I was confused, but also enraged, as you can imagine, of how this was even a conversation or an issue. And in my mind, if I think differently than my husband, that's great. We can have a discussion. We can actually enjoy each other's view. And I don't think we married each other for our political views. So, and these can shift throughout the years. But even thinking that the solution to division in the family is removing the vote to women, I mean, it is crazy. I don't even know how else to call it.
Yeah. Well, let's move back a little bit. Because we could get in there.
Oh, my God. I could continue on that. And then if we start talking about women and feminism and all of that,
I know.
Could have a field day, but we're not here for that. So
not today. Maybe we should make a plan to do that another day.
Yes, I would love that.
So I'd love to ask you to introduce yourself for our listeners in any way that you feel like.
Sure. I am Giulia Galli. Nice to meet you all. I am originally Italian and I live in London. And I help parents create incredible relationships with their children. This is it in a nutshell. How do I do it? I'm a parental coach and I work with parents through sessions, through webinars, through my book, my newsletter, a lot of resources out there, parents. And I help and support them become more intentional in the way they parent. Start parenting from a place of choice rather than from a place of tradition or reaction. And my mission, I've shared this with you before, Anne, my mission is changing the world through the way I raise my children. And that for me is why I'm so passionate about working with parents. And it kind of links to what we were saying before. Our world needs great humans, great human beings. And our job as parents, our responsibility is to raise better humans, humans that can help shape a world or society where good values are shared and lived. So that is my main mission. But, I also help parents solve some tantrums and behavioral issues and a lot of other things that in the daily life are very hard. So it's not just all philosophy. There is a lot of practice as well.
Sure. That sounds great. Perhaps you can recall a moment of joy or an important moment in your childhood and how your parents raised you that made you into the woman you are today?
Absolutely. I was very lucky with my parents. I grew up in the 80s in Italy. So mind you, it was a very traditional world. The culture, the church, how women were perceived, everything in the 80s in Italy was very traditional. My parents were not that. My mom got her degree in law when she was pregnant with me. They got married very early on. They decided not to baptize me, which was crazy for those times because they wanted me to make up my mind. So my household was very open. We could talk about everything and they would talk to me and I was encouraged to be myself, which was incredible. But when I was a teenager, I didn't really know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with myself. There was a very momentous time when I was in high school, when my English teacher decided to take me out of the classroom and have a talk with me. Now, as I said, my household was very open. So for me, it was normal to share my opinion and talk and discuss and ask questions. For me, asking questions was so important. I wanted to understand why people were saying things, why, and especially when I was in school. And it wasn't about authority per se. It wasn't about rebelling. I was a rule follower. I just wanted to understand things better. I wanted to understand why I was learning these things, why they were explaining these things to me. Why did it matter to me? So I was always asking and digging deeper and stopping and raising my hand. So this teacher at one point, she called me out of the classroom and she was like, on behalf of the whole teacher body, please stop. I was like, what do you mean? She said, you interrupt too much, you disrupt the lesson. We get it. We get it. You want to know, but please stop. We can't go on like this. And I remember I wasn't angry. I was actually thinking back about it now. I must have felt like, okay, I'm on the right direction then. If they are uncomfortable with my questions, if they had to stop me, then I must be doing something right. That's what I was thinking. And I think it was very important for me because it didn't stop me from being curious, but curious, not as in nosy, curious as in, I want to understand what's behind this and I want it to make sense for me rather than stop me. And so I don't know if that was her intention or not. But really, that was the beginning of my journey of not only self-discovery, but also discovery of why things were done the way they were. Because as I said, I was always a rule follower. I was never rebellious. I never did anything weird or scary or dangerous. But I never wanted to follow the crowd. I always wanted to find my own way, a way that mattered to me, you know, in my time with my resources. And I was lucky because this was allowed in my family. And I never felt like I had to comply to a certain way. You know, I got married in Las Vegas and I didn't invite any of my family. And everyone was like, oh my God, what did your mother say? I never did anything thinking, what would my parents think? Because it was always my story. And that was always encouraged from them, always, which is a big privilege, I think.
Wow, that's amazing. That was an incredible sentence. It was always my story. Isn't that
important?
Yes, it feels so important. And I'm moved because I find an echo, I guess, in my own parents' style, although there's plenty of things that we were not lucky with in terms of my family and lots of difficulties at times. But this thought that we were both raised, my brother and I, to be told you could be whatever or whoever you want to be. You could marry whoever or not. This openness. And also neither of us were baptized either, not christened. We were told that if we wanted to choose a religion, then we'd be free to. Fascinating. Your father is a coach.
My father is a coach. He wasn't back then.
I didn't think so.
Yes.
When did your father become a coach?
He became a coach when he was 50 years old. He grew up in a very big family. He was the last of 8. So his family story is much different from ours. He did not have a very safe or cushioned upbringing. And he grew up in the family business, which was an auto shop. So it was a garage. And he then grew into this business and then made it like a much bigger business of automobiles. And it wasn't his passion, you know. He kind of did it and he did it well. But he always said, I'm going to stop when I'm 50, which I've always found it fascinating because, you know, I was like, okay, how do you know that? And what will you be doing? He, in fact, did stop when he was 50 and he started studying and then he became a coach. But he always had what I think are very important traits of a coach, characteristics, which is he was always very empathic. He was a great listener. And he never tried, even before, you know, in the 80s or before he even became a coach, he never tried to push his own view on people. And so I think he was kind of born to be one, but he found his way later in life. And I also find my way later in life because I didn't start as a coach. I was, as you know, as you just said, we met when I was in fashion. I think it is kind of like a similar path, fortuitous and coincidental, but also I think I was influenced much by him. So that helped.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, one of the things that I aim to bring to the forefront with the Mettā Interview is just how multifaceted we are. And so I'd love to ask you, what would be an early experience in your life that you think has first planted the seed for the work that you do now?
Well, I don't know if this was early in life, because I think that what happened in high school and how I started asking these questions was a very important moment. I don't know if it definitely shaped the person that I became. But what I'm doing now, I think it came fairly recently. I mean, I became a mother 15 years ago, so I'd like to think it's recently. It's not that recent. But when I became a mother, I remember thinking, this is important. Okay, it was a conscious decision for me. Although my body made it for me, I kind of felt like the need of becoming a mother. And I remember my then boyfriend, now husband, one day I was like, okay, now we're going to have a baby. And he was like, what? What do you mean? I was like, I'm sorry, I need to. I mean, I need to. I don't know how else to explain it. And he trusted me. He didn't say no. He didn't even say yes, though. He trusted me. But I remember when she was born, I remember thinking, this is important. This matters. This matters a lot. And the way that I wanted to raise her was intentional. But I didn't have the word at the time. I didn't have that word. I wasn't a coach. I didn't have all of the instruments that I have now. But I knew that I wanted to do it in a way that was true to myself and that was also good for her. I obviously didn't know what was good for her. What's good for me in the first place, because obviously I don't know. It was always there. And when my son was born as well, then I had a boy and a girl. And obviously for me, gender and roles in the society has always been a big part of the discussion. So I was always very attentive to the way that I was raising them and what I was teaching them about each other, about themselves, about the relationship. And I remember my first act of intentionality, again, I didn't know it then, was when they were very little and they were so little. They were probably like 5, 7. And I remember telling them that there was not going to be a coming out in our house. And they were like, we don't know what that means. And I said, I do not expect you to be loving a woman or a man or anything. I don't expect you to be a certain way. So whatever you turn out to be or find out that you are, you don't have to declare it here. Whatever you are, there's no need of a declaration because I just care that you are you and you explore who you are. And I remember my husband was like, what are you doing? They don't understand. And also like, what's this thing? But for me,
it wasn't how a 5-year-old would be like, thanks.
Yes.
What?
What?
Can I have an ice cream now? Gelato?
Absolutely that. But that was also fine for me. But it was important for me to tell them. And I repeated that in different ways when they were slightly older. But the point was for me, I don't expect you to be anything. So in your discovery, which by the way could be anything, so discover who you are before deciding that you are something. When you find out, just be it. You know, I read so many stories of people that the coming out to their parents is such a difficult moment. It breaks them and it's confusing and it's worrying. And I didn't want that for them. So I said it out loud. I put it out there. That was my intentional declaration. And, you know, however landed back then. But for me, that was the first moment where I took a decision of the parent I wanted to be. And I said it and I put it out there. So I think that was quite transformational because from then on, I thought very, very hard about everything that I was doing with them and why matter and why it was going to matter. And so, you know, there wasn't much space to reaction anymore. It was all very intentional, in fact.
Yeah. You're making me a little bit tearful.
Oh.
Now, I'll tell you why. And I know this is something that's because you write a lot as well. And I know you journal and you use a lot of coaching tools. The more we dig into our own story and try to make sense of what our life has been. And I think for a lot of us, when you go into this kind of field, self-awareness and self-understanding is part of the core that helps you show up, right? For your clients, for our audience, for the readers that you have. And I think that we can have a lot of stories about our families that are reductive, particularly around our parents. And there's certainly an unexamined version of me, younger me, that was perhaps blaming my parents for XYZ parts of my life. Not that I'm not a strong blamer. I tend to take responsibility for myself. However, I remember my mother making the kind of comments, not the same, right, but in her own way. And for her, it was not about gender, it was about race. I remember it incredibly clearly. Her telling me at bedtime when I was, 7, 8, I must have asked a question and her saying, you know, you can love whoever you want to love and you can have kids with whoever you want to have. And it's funny because our parents say a lot to us throughout our lives, throughout our times that we have together. And there's so little that we remember. And the fact that this makes it in my consciousness, I think, speaks to how important it was. There was also a moment where I once said to my mum, "Mum, do we know anyone who's gay?" But it's a TV show or something. And I remember very, very well because we were hanging the laundry and I must have been 11. And she said, "Yes, darling." And I went, "Who?" And she said, "Well, you have to guess." And this is not, there was not a lot of TV shows with gay people. I mean, there was not, this was 1985. Okay. And it didn't take me that long. I ended up realizing that my great uncle shared a very, very large bed with the wonderful Michel, and they were both men. So, and eventually the penny dropped. But it's funny how, not funny, it makes me appreciate this openness, the sweetness, the gift, I think, that we can give to kids when we give them support, or actually when we give them positive reinforcement or positive feedback, like that teacher gave you. Please stop asking questions.
Stop. For sure.
I just love the fact she said the whole, was it teacher's body?
The whole teacher body, yeah, everyone. She was like, "I'm speaking on behalf of everyone.
I'm speaking on behalf.
Yeah, but it's like when you were telling the story of your mom, it's like you had permission when you were 7 to be. And I like that because when children are small, they are asking permission, in different ways, not necessarily asking, maybe sometimes they act it out, but essentially when you're telling them they can be whoever they are, you're giving them permission also to find out, to discover. Yeah. For me, that was when I declared that to my children. It wasn't just about, you don't need to tell me, it's all fine, but it's also about, you may also want to discover a little bit, I grew up in a very traditional culture, I didn't know any gay people when I was growing up. There wasn't any, or at least they weren't out there. So I didn't have that kind of idea that I may be, or I may like. There wasn't an option. And I'm not saying that I am better or worse for it, but it's just what it is. So it's also giving them permission to discover, to experiment, to find out, and be a little bit more open with themselves and give themselves space, rather than having to grow up into a mold that society creates for us, and unspoken permission maybe also does for us. So it's opening. Let's open it up.
Yeah. Now, when did you first become interested in your current field? When did this seed of intentional parenting become something that you thought you were going to do for work?
Of course. I became a coach before becoming a parental coach. So I think that in my 20 years in fashion communication, being a coach to the CEOs, the creative directors, all of the people that I was working with was a big part of my role without really realizing it. Because, they had to be media trained, and I had to help some of them become a creative director, as in like a forward-facing person. They were never one. So there was a lot of coaching into making them believe in themselves, making them believe in what they were going to say, giving them tips of how to breathe, how to speak, So there was a lot of the work being done throughout my career, which was in communication anyway. So it was for sure kind of already an important foundation to this. But when I then did my certifications and my courses in neuro-linguistic programming, I remember the first one I did it just for myself because I decided to leave fashion, and I wanted to discover finally in my 40s who I was and what I liked, because I had been doing fashion since I was very young, and it happened to me, and I had a lot of fun and I loved it for me. But then I wanted to find out, okay, who am I really? So my first NLP course was just for me. It was just to really find out what I could use this for, what were the things that I could use this better for. I loved it so much that I decided to continue. And then I took my master, and then I took other certifications, and I was coaching people on life. That's what I knew, which was all great. I love that. It's fantastic. I also love to talk to people. I love to listen to people. So it was really fitting for me, until at some point it happened very close to two moments, very close to one another, of two people who know my family, my children know us. And in two different occasions, they all both said in different ways, but the concept was, I really wish my children are going to grow up like yours. Your children are really great. And I remember in both times thinking, thank you. But also that's not a coincidence. They are great. But I did a lot. My husband and I did a lot to raise them like this. So it just didn't happen. We made it happen. So that was kind of the catalyst to the thinking that, okay, I am a good parent because I've got proof, and people say that to me. So it's not just my own, perception. But now I also have instruments and tools and strategies of how the brain works and how language is important, and a lot of things from coaching and NLP that I didn't have before. So I decided to put it together. And I thought, this really is my field. This really is my niche, because I really care about the way we parent. For me, it really is important. And I do put in the work first. And I did before this. So, I walked the walk before doing the talk, So when I started crafting my method and putting it all together and researching and doing even more courses to make sure that, I was actually gaining all of the insights that I could, researching everything, it kind of all made sense, because, I kept thinking, we prepare for a job. We do go to university. We do read and research, and we also keep up with the work, and we have managers giving us feedback, and in the workplace, etc. But parenting, which arguably is probably one of the most important jobs that one person who is a parent can have, no one learns. We kind of go on with what our parents did that we liked or that we didn't like, so we adjust on the job. But very few of us really stop and think and choose what kind of parent they want to be for their children. And I thought this was important. I thought this was going to be something that I was encouraging people to do from now on, because I'm not teaching them how to be a parent. I'm not giving them my method. I'm not giving them my values. What I'm giving them is the opportunity to stop, look back, reassess, and go forward with intention, which means from a place of choice. I work a lot with parents on values, for example. Like, what are your values? Are they really yours? Do they come from your parents, from society? Do they still fit you? And are these the values you want you to give your children? And how do you live those values for them? How do they show up every day? I think for me, values are like the lighthouse. They show us the light. When we know where our values are, we know where to go, because decisions every day are either abiding to those values or not. That's so easy then, So it became a calling before it became a job. It became very important. It is very important. And I do work with parents who are struggling with, as I was saying before, everyday issues, because, sometimes course correcting is more difficult than starting out intentionally. And especially parents of teenagers, because it is traditionally a time of friction. Teenagers are testing out who they are. I remember, I told you when I was a teenager, I was so opinionated and I wanted to find my way. So it is a time of friction. So when parents have tools of intentionality, well, there are less frictions. They don't disappear. They're still teenagers, that's their job. But it is much more enjoyable. And so, yeah, that's what I'm set out to do.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I love that this came from feedback, right? It makes sense. I understand that. I feel like something similar happened with me where people kept on coming to me to talk about how to speak about who they are, right? I didn't set out to start in this direction, but I could see how I was writing about it all the time. Oh, you made me laugh so much, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that just as you were talking about how technically you were kind of always coaching in your role in communication and fashion. My head went back and I started giggling because, bless him, I used to joke that Christian Louboutin, my old boss, was both like a father and a toddler. It's like my dad and my child. So the coaching, all of what you described just resonated very deeply with me.
Doesn't it? It's ingrained. You have to. I think that to be a good, and I don't know if the word PR is a good word for what we were doing actually, because it was so much more than that. But to be doing to be doing that role, our own state was important, our own, because it was never about us, but the way we were was conducive of the way that they would become. We had to be in a state that was calm and confident, and we had to have it and then give it to them for them to be able to do it on camera and like reassuring and giving them the right words. If it's not a coach, I don't know what that is.
No, you're so right.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to describe your professional journey as a type of journey, so it could be, I don't know, a train journey, a road trip, a climb, or I don't know, if it's a Western, you're on horseback, a safari. What kind of journey would you describe your career to be so far?
Wow. My career has been, it's like, okay, I have it. It's like a roller coaster, which I don't love, by the way. I don't love roller coasters. I have recently been on one for the first time, and I was like, it's not for me.
Okay.
Because the roller coaster, the one I've been on, went up, very slowly, very enjoyably, very steadily on the up, which is exactly how I did in my fashion career. I started as an intern, and then I became an assistant, I became a manager, I became a director from Milan to London, and it was steady, and it was easy, and it was enjoyable, and it was fun. Got to the point, stopped for a while. So I was on my roller coaster. I was in this adventure park in Italy. And then the roller coaster stops at the top. And you're like, okay, I enjoy the view. This is quite good. And then it goes like, whoo, and it went down. And that's exactly what happened. I got to the top of my fashion career, the top that I reached. And I was like, I quite enjoyed this. I don't know. Let me see what's next. And then I left. And it went down, and I went straight to the bottom. And then it was scary. So the way down was very scary, because to compare it to the roller coaster, it was enjoyable on the way up, and I knew what was going to happen, and I knew where I was. And then all of a sudden it was down, and it was so scary, and I didn't know what was going to come next.
Yeah.
So the roller coaster went down, and then it can like sideways and curveballs. And this is what happened from the moment I left to where I am now. I tried different things. I experimented. I researched. I went sideways. I was on a high and then again on a low. And I was sure I was doing the right thing. And I was questioning everything. And I think now I'm not at the bottom. I mean, I'm not, or at the top of it. I'm not done. I'm in that moment where I'm like, okay, I'm not scared anymore, but I'm still I'm still in the cart, I'm still, it's still moving. So I don't know whether now it's going to still start going up steadily, enjoyably, or if it's going to throw a little more curveballs. I feel like I am at the beginning of my journey for this new part.
Sure.
And it's not as clear as it was the beginning of my other journey. Probably because I was young and I didn't have many responsibilities as I do have now. I also didn't have maturity enough to be maybe worrying or thinking so much ahead. I was living kind of day by day, and it was good enough for me that it was fun and challenging and interesting and new. I would say it's been a ride. And it is going. I am not a risk taker. So the scary parts are not very enjoyable for me. I much rather know exactly what happens, but I know that's not life. So I know that. So I'm open now. I'm much more open. And I think before it was a career, now it's a passion and it's different. And I think that everyone that I've talked to that are pursuing their passion told me it takes time and it takes work and effort, especially for something like I'm doing that is not necessarily so common or so known.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think many parents think about a parental coach the first time they have an issue. You know, I don't think that is the first time at all, the first thing that comes to mind at all. So I do think that there is a little bit more of learning from me and for my clients base before this really become again like a steady career. But I love that, and I love that I am still in the discovery phase of a lot of things. And the more I work with parents, and the more this becomes richer and stronger, and so I like it. I like it now.
It's a very powerful metaphor, I find, when we describe our professional path as a type of journey. You had me with you there on the roller coaster. I'd love to ask you, switching gears a little, I'd love to find out, what's a skill that you've acquired that surprises you?
Well, a listening to understand and not listen to correct or listen to solve, more than correct. One of the things I'm very good at is fixing things, right? I am quick on my feet. Something happens, I'm like, okay, I can fix this. I can give you the solution. I got ideas, you know, it's my strong suit. And I love that about me. I don't think that is necessary all the time for other people, at least, you know. I think it's good if someone comes and asks, help me fix it, they would benefit from it. Before, I was very impulsive in jumping in with solutions and with my way. And it turns, you know, we've established I was opinionated since the beginning. And we've established I was strong and direct. And that was something that still is. I have learned to listen, to understand. I have learned to listen really to, actually, now that I'm thinking about this is the skill that is happening in what I was looking for back then, because I was looking to understand, but I was probably not listening very well. I was already thinking about my next question or thinking about why, what. And now that I have developed the skills of really listening, really be present, I discover so much that I don't even need 3 or 4 questions that I might have needed before. And one thing that was revolutionary for me was a book that I know you have, because I can see through your microphone. It's Time to Think.
Yes.
And we've discussed about this before. When I read that book, it all made sense. And the time to think, which for me is, as a listener, allowing the time to think to the person that is with me, opens world to them and to me. To them, because with time, when we are not forced, we can find out so much of what's going on inside, thoughts that we've never thought of. But you need someone who allows that time, and someone who allows you the presence as well. And to me as the listener, because I really find out what comes out of the other person. And most of the time, people surprises me so much. Not because I didn't think they were capable of, but because without allowing them or allowing people the time to think, we stop at the surface. You know, we don't allow for deeper thinking. And I love deeper thinking. So the skill of listening is something that I hold very, very precious, and it's a treasure for me now. It's something that I don't want to let go ever. So it takes practice to become a good listener. And it takes for me also reminding myself that now I am a good listener, so I have to listen as well. I value it a lot, really, really a lot.
Yeah, it's a real gift to oneself, really. One of the things that I've had the pleasure to develop over the last few years by having a first podcast out of the clouds while I was doing my mindfulness teacher training, while I was doing my coaching training, and because I was editing my own work in audio before some of the current tools, because I used to be a singer, so audio editing did not scare me. I noticed physically in front of me, right, looking at the wavelength of the various parties in conversation, how much even an interruption like I have done, just saying can actually disturb the other person's thinking. And so I do my best when I show up here, and I do my best when I show up for my clients. And I'm sure, like you, then maybe in my day-to-day life, slightly less effective, still a work in progress. But what I think is really fascinating is to look at what happens when we let people go to the end of their thought, right? Because we can go so much further. But if we get stopped, then it's a pattern interrupt, and then we don't discover.
I agree. I also think that people at first are scared of the silences. So they're people, and I'm generalizing, of course, but most of the people are used to a back and forth exchange. So I find that when I'm, especially obviously when I'm with a client and they speak and I listen and I don't even speak immediately after they've stopped, I leave a little bit of a pause. At the beginning, it makes them a little bit uncomfortable, which I like, by the way. But they need time to understand that this is allowed, that this is okay, that I am actually encouraging the time, the space. Once they learn this, they really go into it and they kind of expect it. So they speak, they stop, and then they continue. But they know that they have that pause to continue their thinking inside. Because when you don't know that you have that opportunity, that luxury, you don't go any deeper. You stop there, right? And you wait for the other person to speak. And then you continue. But when you know you have that space, there is where you find your next thoughts, which is still yours. It's not polluted by what I said, which may enrich it or not, but still, it's different. That one is still yours. It's still coming out of you. So I am talking about these listening space to as many people as I can, even outside of my work, even my friends, my kids, everyone, because I would like this to become something that people expect, or that at least when they grant, the other person knows that this is a possibility. So a different kind of human interaction comes out, something different. And I told you this before, but I was always looking for another way. I was always looking for a different way. So when I find something that for me is revolutionary, I want to put it out there, because there must be other ways of doing things other than the ways that we are so used to that work sometimes they may not, and they don't work for everyone, because there are people that don't form thoughts as quickly as others, and they need time. Otherwise, they are categorized as the quiet ones, or the ones that don't really have an opinion, but they don't have time to form it. So let's give these people space.
You know, I think we had to talk about this today. Years ago, I did a course with Seth Godin, which was a seminal moment in my life, called the Alt MBA. And one of the prompts, horrifyingly difficult prompt, was we had to all figure out one thing that we'd want to talk about publicly. And I remember that at the time there were some dissensions in Spain. I remember because I was talking about it with my friend Lupe, there were some issues in the region of Catalonia and also in the Basque country. And I remember hearing a particularly difficult interview with a man who was very famous with a big podcast and who just explained that he'd been molested as a child. And I was thinking about all of these things that we never have the space to talk about. We spend our times being very busy and interrupting each other's thought patterns. And so I also thought that there should be a new way. And my theory is there should be a new kind of word for what you described. A word that says, I like to speak and be listened to. Right? It could be a word. It could also be a gesture. I was thinking a friend of mine, Jennifer Fisher, when we talked about private stuff, she'd always make like a little house on top of her head saying, this is safe. But I think that sometimes we need, when we identify something that is new, that we know is good, that the world needs, let's formalize it.
Oh my God, I love this. Are you asking us as a community to come up to change, to add a word to the vocabulary, to
yes, and it could be
language
we can
develop?
invent it. Oh, I know you love language, and I've already purchased the domain weneedanewword.com. So you know.
Oh my God, this is going to be so much fun.
But
so much fun.
Yes, I think that we can agree that there's another way of communicating, one that leaves much more space for self-expression, for being listened to, right? Because what you described, this space that you're offering your clients, and I'm sure that you were offered yourself when you were being trained, and it's beautiful. And what I think is also fascinating is when we see it well modeled, when we see it in action, then this can become something that we take on almost as if you were putting on a coat or a jacket saying, hey, I see what this conversation needs. Let me take on the I'm a good listener coach like Giulia. I feel like there could be some really interesting things to explore from there.
I love that. And, I always say to my clients, when I'm encouraging them, because, when we're as parents, we don't really listen to our children. We know better. We know more. We've been there. We know why they're doing that. They don't need to be doing that. We have it all. The reality is that when we learn this skill of listening to them and giving them space to form their thoughts, even when we think their thoughts are not perfect, because they aren't, because they are in development, they are in evolution, we give them space to learn how to think for themselves, which is, again, something that you don't teach normally. You teach children to walk and to speak. You don't teach them to think. Imagine how revolutionary it's going to be if we start teaching our children how to think for themselves. That is something incredible. And when we learn that it can be actively thought by the way we behave with them and how we model it for them and how we encourage it for them, this is something that didn't exist before. And not at least, as you were saying, you're trying to find the world. I try to verbalize it. I try to make it a thing. Because for me, the most ironic thing of parents is that we spend the first year to learn them and encourage them to walk and speak. And then we spend the following years asking them to sit still and be silent. how confusing is that for them, but also how crazy it is for us. So do we want them to move and speak, or do we want them silent and still? Make up your mind, man. I'm like, come on. There has to be a more intentional way of doing these things and teaching them actively how to think, giving them this space, helping them work it out or have a thought. And then imagine how powerful they will be when they go out in the world and do their thing. Yeah. Because, when they are in the playground, or where they're at school, or where they would go to uni, where any kind of situation when we are not with them, they're going to have to do it on their own. And if they got the skills, that's so much powerful, and that's so much easier for them as well. Like, let's help them.
When I hear you speak about this, what sort of arises inside of me is how important it is to allow ourselves the space to think. So if you're teaching people this is also going to bring it into their own lives, so everyone gets enriched by the process. I think that also, having read some studies and articles on this recently, I think that there's a certain scare among neuroscientists and other medical professionals as to what will be human thinking if we outsource all of our thinking and our work out to AI. So this feels like a really essential thing for everyone, any person listening, to consider bringing into their own practice. I'll add this, and this is giving me a little physical reaction. It gives me a little bit of shivers. I noticed most recently, and this is probably, I'm hoping, a sign of me maturing as a coach, as a facilitator, the space that we allow in conversation, the space where we allow for silence and where we explicitly invite a sense of being with ourselves and listening from the inside out. I notice that sometimes what emerges is not a thought. Sometimes it's an image or a memory, and it's not what we expect. It's perhaps not as linear, but it's generally something that is deeply human, impossible to replicate, completely unique to us, almost like, a thumbprint, right? Just as incredibly unique to us. And I love that you brought us to this part of the conversation, to considering this practice, because I don't believe that we place enough value on this, the multiple types of inner wisdom and knowledge that can arise from our experience. And I think the space between the thoughts, that's what lets this come up.
I agree. And you know what did it for me? When you and I were talking before this podcast, you asked me some questions, and our conversation went to a point where I myself remembered some things that happened. And by having the space and the time and the encouragement to think about them, I was able to piece together a journey that otherwise I wouldn't have. And how it brought me here, and why it matters so much to me now, and why I think it matters for the world, and what else this can bring to my work that is mine. Because I love AI. I use AI, and I think it's fabulous.
Yes.
But AI without me for my work, it's nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just a nice tidy up of things, which, okay, is useful and it's very helpful and I love it. But if I am not able to bring my own story, my own way, my own experience, then it's for me, it's nothing. For other things, maybe a lot. But for me, it's nothing. And encouraging kids and people to think of themselves also, I think, will give them the assurance that human thinking cannot be replaced by AI. Then a lot of things will be able to, and AI will learn, and all is great. But human thinking, human relations humanity, how important it is to be treating people a certain way. AI cannot replace that.
Yeah.
It just can't, physically can't right now. I don't know, in 30 years, maybe there will be robots that will be doing all of this. But right now, there are things that AI can't replace. And those are the things that I also teach my kids. I don't have many rules. I don't like rules in general, as in like follow the rules. But obviously there are ways of being that I'm teaching them. For example, I teach them always accept someone's apology. That's something that I'm very strong about. Like someone's apologized, you accept that apology. You may not forget, but you forgive. Someone's apologized, you always accept. Or always do your best. Mm-hmm. Your best is the best. Your effort is the result. I also teach them always bring toilet paper when someone asks for it, because it's a matter of dignity, so that's important. But there are very few, principles that I teach them, and they are all linked to being human, to humanity, to connecting, to how we connect with people, which is the one thing that it cannot be taken away. So when we are encouraging that, honing those skills, soft skills, or our human traits, I think that makes us safe and that makes us human. And the world needs this so much right now. So please, everyone, let's be more human. Let's do that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you and I talked last time, the point for me was to tease out what could be the big question that feels really alive for you at the moment. And there were a couple of different ways we could have gone, but you zeroed in on your question. Can you please share what your question is? And then we can try to pick it apart and talk about what it means.
My question is, what is my intention?
Okay.
And it was very natural, because my approach, my philosophy is intentional parenting. But intention was the word that started it all. And it is the word that I really feel embodies me as a word. If I was a word, I would be intention. And going back to my roots, to when I was younger, that was it. What's my intention here? What is the intention of this? Intention as in purpose and choice.
Okay.
So
please explain.
What is the intention of something? For me means, what do you want to do? What are you trying to achieve with what you're doing or saying right now? Mm-hmm. But also, what is your choice? And are you conscious and aware that your choice are yours? So the responsibility that comes from the choice is also yours. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's intention as purpose and accountability, perhaps. And the way that I bring this in my work with parents is mainly, I want them to choose what kind of parents they want to be. Mm-hmm. I want them to decide what their intention as parent is. Mm-hmm. When you have an intention, it's not like you know exactly what's going to happen. It's like setting off on a journey with your destination in your sat-nav, right? You know where you're going. And if you go use a sat-nav, they give you the way. But if you use an old-fashioned map, you have a destination and then you draw your way. Both ways, you have the road mapped out. Now, you don't know what's going to happen there. You don't know along the way if there are things that are going to take you off the road, things that you're going to have to solve. Anything can happen between now and the destination. When you have a destination and you know which way you're going, you can manage those curveballs in much more conscious way. You're ready for it because you already have it planned. So everything that happens on the way, because you have your destination, you kind of know how to solve it because you know where you're going. And it kind of intentionality removes reactivity because you come from a place of choice rather than a place of reaction. And you know that because you know what you want to go, your choice really matters, because they will decide whether you stay on track or you completely go off. So for me, understanding what is my intention makes the journey so much smoother. And as a parent, I think we need all of the smoothness, all of the easiness that we can get, because every day is tough. And when you have it, when you know where you're going, it is much easier to take decisions, to say yes or no, to decide everyday things, right?
Sure.
So that's what looks like for me.
I think I just saw something that you posted on LinkedIn where you talked about coming off autopilot. How is this linked to intention? Because I feel like there's something that you need to give me in there.
Absolutely. How to get out of autopilot is probably one of the first things that I teach my clients. There is what normally people call the comfort zone. And we all know it's not comfortable at times. So I prefer to use the term that Virginia Satir used, which is the familiarity zone, which is a place where it's familiar. So we know exactly how to behave. We feel maybe not good, maybe not comfortable, but we know, it's familiar. So it's safe.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's the place we want to be. It doesn't mean it even feels fine, but we know it. And that is exactly the place where we behave, where we act in autopilot. Because it's when something happens, we already know. And so we shoot out responses. That happens a lot in parenting, because some of the examples that the parents make, I'm like, I tell them to put on their shoes because we need to get out. They don't do it. So I ask them twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. And then at the 7th time, I have to shout. And finally, they put on their shoes. And I said, that's exactly the familiarity zone for you and for them. If you're used to say it once, but you don't really mean it, they know that. They know that you can ask 6 times before you shout. They're not going to come at the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd. They know that their cue is the shouting. Imagine if you never get to the shouting. Imagine if you say once and then you don't say it anymore. That is like, for them, it's like, what is happening? Why is mom not telling me a million times and then shouting? That is powerful, because it's basically taking us out of the familiarity zone. I choose not to do the pattern I always do. I choose not to react on autopilot. I choose how to act. I choose how to respond. I don't allow not my instincts, because I love instincts. I don't allow my reactivity to take over. Okay. I want to be in charge of the way that I speak. I mean, come on, that's pretty major, no? We are human being with power to think and power to behave, and we should use that very well.
Yeah.
And for parents, it's a massive shift, because it takes the responsibility away from the children's behavior and into our own choice. And when we realize that it's not them that make us angry and make us shout, it's us. And well, then it changes everything. Because do you want to be the person who chooses to shout? So
you're making me think about how I'm parenting my dog. But anyway, let's swiftly move on from that.
Yes.
I want to ask you, how did you first solidify your own commitment towards working with intention? I hear your earlier story about how you came into contact with why it was important, but at which point did you realize that this was also your very own deep mission to be connected to your own intention?
Because probably I never listened to it really before.
No.
And when I started to, when I realized that, it's kind of like I allow myself to be true to myself, but I didn't know what was true before I found out what really was. So now every time I do a piece of writing, every time I have a coaching session with a client, every time I do a webinar for a company in front of people, every time I speak about these things, a little piece adds to the puzzle and it becomes more complete. And every time I do it, I learn something new about what I'm talking about myself. I love that. So it keeps cementing, I don't think it will ever be done. I think it's going to be the puzzle with infinite amount of pieces, and it will always add a little bit to it. Also the part about listening allows me now to get so much more from people. And because I listen more, I absorb more, and I add pieces of the puzzle. And that for me is my intentionality, which is make sense of it like I wanted to do at 15. But now I've got the tools, I've got the space, I've got the maturity, because I don't have to prove that I am a certain way to anyone, especially to myself, which I was trying to do back then. I don't have to prove it to anyone. I can allow myself the luxury of learning, of talking, of speaking, of enriching myself, and then giving it out to people. And for me, my intention to change the world also means putting out some questions that make people uncomfortable because they never thought about them before, but that allows them to think about that. You know, when I ask parents, how do you speak to your kids about money, which is something that I'm doing with another fellow coach, or how do you speak to kids about sex? I want to make them a bit uncomfortable because those are normally topics that make people uncomfortable, and they shouldn't be with our own children. So my intention also is to keep putting things out there that make people think. And we all go back there, it's all about the thinking. Yeah. But it keeps adding a piece every day. And the more I do it, the more I speak about it, the more I know it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. For now, who knows where we're going later. But for now, I know it's here.
That's wonderful. This feels like probably the right place to land or to finish or to wrap up this interview. Do you agree? Does that feel like a good place?
I agree. It's a good place. And actually, thank you a lot, because we have had a couple of conversations that led up to this, but also I did your intention hour.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And your questions, your presence, your rhythm, and the space that you've allowed me have unlocked so much more than what I had. It's been a privilege to be able to speak with you, Anne, because
you're going to make me cry.
I am being honest. I'm only honest. I'm so direct.
I know.
I really want to thank you, because you've asked me, how do I know that this is where I want to be and how my intention shows up every day? The conversations I had with you, even this one, especially this one, have added so many pieces. So thank you very much for this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I absolutely adore what you're doing. And I want to take this time to briefly mention to whoever you are listening that we're about to announce a live masterclass with Giulia on March 4th. And one of the things that I remember from our last conversation is, even though we're going to be talking about parenting, everyone's welcome to join. I think that to the same extent that I had found the most amazing dog trainer who I have requested on her YouTube channel, whether she wants to take care of people, I think that what you talk about when you talk about parenting and intentionality, it feels relevant to me, and I'm not a mum. I think that for everyone out there who doesn't have a child, but who does want to get implicated in the future of this human race, given what we see around us at the moment, I think intentionality and parenting are topics that can open up new perspectives, new ways of thinking. And we've established, hopefully, that new ways of thinking are really important.
Yes. Very, absolutely. Yes.
I'd love to allow ourselves just a moment to reflect perhaps asking you if there's anything that you noticed that surprised you in our discussion, or anything that you want to take away, anything that you want our listeners to take away.
Yes, the main takeaway is be kind to yourself, to the people, and this kindness can come out in terms of acts, in terms of words, but especially in terms of space. So let's amplify what makes us us, which is our humanity, and let's be kind to people, to the people next to us, to the people far from us, to the people we know, to those that we don't know, because that is the only thing that we have that no one can take away from us. So in however way you want to do it, actions, words, time, listening ear, that's my message to you, to us, to me, every day. Be kind, and let's make the world a bit nicer for everyone.
Let's make the world a bit nicer for everyone. Yeah, I want to say, I think I was surprised how you talking about some of your story, your parenting stories, shone an even brighter light on some of the gifts that I was given by my parents. And just saying this to you again, it's making me misty. And I love that. They're no longer here, but it feels like a beautiful, sort of generous reconnection to something that I don't think about very often. Giulia, thank you so much for your time. This was such a beautiful conversation. I hope that our listeners have enjoyed it as well. I'll put all of the links to your work so people can discover your book, your website, your newsletter, and follow you on the socials. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to spending more time together, perhaps also in person. I'm crossing all of my fingers.
Yes.
But until next time, wishing you a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who listened, and thank you, Anne, for having me. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation on the Mettā Interview. If this resonated with you and you haven't subscribed yet, then please do so. You don't want to miss the brilliant minds I will continue to bring on to these conversations. The Mettā Interview is available wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you can also watch the full video conversations on YouTube. You'll find the link in the show notes. Also, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to my newsletter, The Mettā View. It's the cousin to the Mettā Interview. You'll find it at themettaview.com, and it's Metta with 2 T's. In that newsletter, I regularly share written reflections and insights that complement these conversations. That's where I approach and work through life with a mindful lens. If you're intrigued as well about the masterclasses that my wonderful, brilliant friends and guests are offering through Le Trente, if you're excited and want to know about our events online and in person, about coaching and or working with me one-on-one, visit letrente.com, that's letrente.com, to discover more about our community and our offerings. Now, before I leave you, your engagement helps these conversations reach more people who may benefit from them. So please do me a huge favor. Share this episode with someone who may appreciate it. Leave us a rating, a review. You can even comment on each episode on Spotify, for example. So every little bit of support will help, and it's really lovely to hear from you and to find out what you think about what we're putting out in the world. Until next time, thanks for listening.